it looks like we're up and running
Again.
again.
We're a day late and $1 short.
Yeah. I guess that's what happens when you do this kind of when you want to, and there really isn't any particular schedule. We are retired.
Yeah.
Is today the second Saturday or the first Sunday? I can never get
It's
that.
lucky 7 today. It's the
Ooh.
7th of March.
There we are.
Today's the day you rush off to the casino and piss away your money.
I do that any day.
Just by going to the grocery
I
store.
usually just walk in like this and they.
Oh man, I tell you, it's been a wild and woolly week, you know.
Well, it sure has, and talking pre-production, I don't know how it's going to end. I have no idea where it's going to end. I have no idea whether there's going to be a white knight riding in to save us. It's getting to the scary point.
Yeah, it is. I mean, there's things we can joke about. For starters.
Yeah.
I don't know if you heard or read that our illustrious premier a couple of days ago was prancing about with Melanie Joly and said she's the smartest woman he's ever met, or words to that effect. And I thought, well, if that's the smartest woman he's ever met, so to speak, says a lot about his IQ.
Well, you got to remember, these are just politicians, and they're at best they're lightweights in what they're doing. I mean, look at the premier that we have out here that was caught bald face in a lie. That the federal government sprung this land treaty negotiation on him like it was he'd never heard of it before, but then it started to come out with him at the signing ceremonies. I if they had a brain that worked between all of them, we might be okay. But it started a dozen years ago now with the big thing that Canada's back on the stage. It's 2015, so we have to have gender equality in the cabinet, and now, of course, we've got this whole thing where we're the post nation state. And people quite well, what is a post nation state? And look it up on the internet. It'll tell you exactly what it is. And we've hit that peak. My bugbear has always been, and it probably still will be, just look at what was the Canadian passport to what is now the Canadian passport. Before, we had things on there that showed what we had done, what we stood for. Some military stuff, which might offend the doves, but there was pictures of Vimy Ridge. There was pictures of the Peace Tower. There were pictures of Niagara Falls. There were pictures of the Grey Cup. Pictures of the Stanley Cup. Things that you could point to and have at least some modicum of pride in. And now all we get to look at is stick figures and snowflakes, and it just is, it's, to me, disheartening.
Well, it's culture, which is politics downstream.
True. And as you had mentioned, politics downstream, we've got a guy downstream who's so busy flying around the world on a Canadian Amex card that he can't even be bothered to be here to try and sort out how the government's going to respond to what's going on in the Middle East. And I think,
well, like I said in our on our X platform, I said, look, of all the G20 countries, only Canada's leader isn't at home when we're facing probably the most consequential event since 9/11. Everybody else is trying to figure out what happens next and
Mhm.
how to deal with this whole business. And he's on his 2-week tour without even remotely having a logical thing to say about it, because he flip-flopped at least 4 times on what the whole impact of the action by the Israelis and the Americans, and what Canada's position. Nobody cares what Canada's position is anyway. But that's the reality. We've become irrelevant on the world stage, sadly, because of the post-nation state. This is a DEI-driven bunch of nonsense that we've been putting up with for over 11 years. Look, so that's where we are today,
Yeah,
and so fine. But I think even the most ill-informed will come to understand that when somebody like President Scheinbaum in Mexico the other day basically announced that they're not going to be part of the CUSMA or USMCA, because they're going to go bilaterally negotiating with the United States, because they're not interested in what Canada has to say, basically, because they find Canada's a giant, red tape driven
bureaucracy.
bureaucracy that you can't get stuff done with, and it's all talk, no action, no substance, performative stuff all the time by the leadership, and they figured it out. And by the way, they're now the #1 trading partner of the U.S., not Canada. We're #2 now, because as corrupt and as screwed up as Mexico is, they know that they have advantages over us in dealing with the Americans. Period.
And,
So, and I don't
and
hear much yapping coming out of the foreign minister's head or the prime minister's office about, we're under the bus. How do we figure this? Well, you don't. You're too busy,
yeah,
doing virtue signaling nonsense down in D.C. with Dominic LeBlanc, taking, the negotiator who has really so big deal that she has a diplomatic background, but that's not what we need when we're negotiating trade. You need someone who's a hard-nosed, capitalist business person, knows how to go toe-to-toe with hard-nosed capitalist business people that the Trump administration is throwing our way.
mhm.
Okay, this has been a bad week. Forget Iran for a minute. The Japanese basically knew that Carney's, prancing about in Tokyo, signing worthless agreements that mean really nothing. But they made it very clear the only reason that Honda and Toyota are in Canada is because they make cars to sell into the States. And all the Americans have to say is, you know what? You build these cars here, great. You build them in Canada, we're going to whack 100% tariff on it because it's a Japanese car. It's not a Canadian car. It's a Japanese car. That's the corporate look of things. You can dress this up all you want, and the Japanese know that. And you think that they would give away the chance to continue to operate in the American market just to please Canadians? They'd be gone in a heartbeat.
If they haven't already started the process.
Well, Stellantis has already said they're cutting more stuff out of Brampton, so
Well, you know,
that's a dead duck. And I'm sure that Melanie Joly is going to send a strongly worded memo to Stellantis. Big deal. I mean, they
well,
don't
yeah,
care.
I'm sure they will. Like pay us back the money that we gave you. I don't think so.
I don't think so. I
No.
don't think so. This is where we are, and as we were talking in pre-production, over a week ago, the juveniles prancing about, talking smack about what we're doing with the U.S. on trade and what have you. In the meantime, an earth-shaking event occurs, and we haven't even been informed, because why would they inform us? They were asking the foreign minister Anand, well, did you know that they're doing this in Iran? No, I wasn't informed. Well, why do you think you'd be informed? Because the first thing you do is you probably call the IRGC that's running around in Canada and tell them that, oh, you're going to be in big trouble. Were you informed about Venezuela? No, we weren't informed. Why do you think you weren't informed? Because you're irrelevant. This is the part that we didn't used to be like this. We used to be actual allies, actual
Mhm.
partners, and we actually
Yeah,
had skin in the game. We have no skin in any of these games anymore.
yeah, we don't, which is sad, very, very sad.
That doesn't
And I
mean you
guess,
can't have an independent foreign policy, but you got to have
well, you
some
can,
kind
yeah.
of approach.
Well, you need a policy that doesn't change as often as you change your socks. And I guess that's part of the problem here.
Or
Um,
diapers, as used to call it the other day.
you
No,
know,
well, I mean, what relevance do we have militarily in any of this? Zero. Think about it. What relevance do we have as a middle power? He keeps talking about this middle power stuff. What middle power are you talking about?
well, I don't know. We certainly, middle power, I guess we have to take a look at what Britain, the UK has become, France has become, Germany has become, we're kind of all sitting on the fringes right now, looking at what the US, Russia, and China are doing.
Well, there's at the moment really only two superpowers to talk about, when that's China and the U.S., both militarily and trade wise.
Economically, yeah.
Yeah, or economically. You know, Russia is a superpower because it can annihilate the whole world with more nuclear weapons than the rest of them combined have. So that puts them in a different league. But that's basically what middle power. What the UK has some airplanes that they might get off the ground and a couple of submarines. Okay, fine. Same with the
France.
French, wandering around with various bases in Africa and in Lebanon and wherever, in the Middle East. But middle power means nothing unless you can actually project power. The UK isn't projecting power anywhere. France isn't projecting power. In fact, they're getting their backsides kicked out of Africa because they've had enough of their colonial nonsense. So,
Mhm.
what middle powers are we talking about? Japan is a middle power in its own right, probably in Southeast Asia, because it has a strong relationship with the U.S. militarily.
And I guess too, Australia, New Zealand, but they're islands. They have to be kind of
Yeah,
bigger
that's
military, bigger
well,
navies, bigger this, bigger
but
that.
but they too have succumbed to a large degree to the influence of China, and now have to come up with a policy that weaves some kind of a relationship, because geographically they're there. Okay, they
Yeah.
have to deal with China, India. Which, when this business with the U.S. trade negotiations started before Iran, was told, don't you buy Russian oil. And the Indians supposedly said, well, okay, we'll wean ourselves off of Russian oil. Where am I getting it? Well, we'll send it to you. Well, this is interesting. Who's we? Well, we is, American interests in the oil business. Venezuela ships all the way over to India with oil, because that's what this looks like. Except that they don't have enough of it now that the balloon has gone up in Iran, and a fifth to a quarter of all the oil in the world goes through the Gulf of
Strait of
Oman,
Hormuz.
Straits of Hormuz. Well, now the Indians have been told, well, okay, you can buy Russian oil for the time being. No kidding.
Or alternatively, you can be like us. We can buy liquefied natural gas from Australia.
Don't even go there, because that is so. There's more natural gas under the feet of the entire province of Nova Scotia untapped that would solve the problem. But no, 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 no. Who dreamt this up? It doesn't.
Well, I guess it goes back, as you were saying, pre-production. We're really not even a post-nation state. We are just lessees, lessors of real estate here.
It is real estate. It's a giant piece of real estate, which people are going to be mad when we say this. But explain to me what it is that we're doing differently to build this country for our kids and our grandkids.
Nothing,
Nothing.
nothing.
Okay.
Uh,
I mean, our parents did all the heavy lifting, frankly, after the war. And then, we had a pretty good run of it as boomers, as they say. Now, you and I are not in the elbows up crowd, obviously, but You know, we wanted to pass our gains down to our kids and grandkids so they could build on that. And you know, but it's build on what? I can
Well,
tell you, all my kids are working their tails off just to make ends meet, and they have good jobs. But
and it's also too like maybe we're not the rich boomers um, that we're
that's for
portrayed to
sure.
be, but if we don't manage our funds, we better hope that we die before we're 80. You know,
Yeah.
so, yeah.
Oh, that's right. I mean, I was in
And
the beginning of the month, you do the books and you go, man, oh man, 10 years
you know,
tops.
I guess the old joke of if you've done it right, if you die and the last check bounces, then it's probably done right. But you know, I used to say that it's a joke, and I'm not so sure it's a joke anymore.
Oh no, it's reality. You know, every first couple of days of the month, you know, you get your bills and you have to, okay, things have to be paid. And then you realize that, you know, that $6 jar of jam you bought is starting to show up on your credit card or on your debit card, right? And the $9.99 375 grams of bacon, you're not buying that anymore because you can't afford it. And so it's I don't want to hear this virtue signaling crap out of Ottawa, out of Queens Park in Toronto, here in Ontario. It's because it's all nonsense, and you're not doing me a favor by sending me a $45 credit or whatever every quarter. Like that doesn't even buy a
Well,
bag of groceries. What are you talking about? I don't want your money. This is
mhm.
the part that makes me so angry. You take 52% pretty well out of my pocket now of every buck I ever have, and then you graciously give me back 10%
And then
of nothing,
and then they tax it later on
and then
anyway.
they
So
tax it back. Yeah, I mean, and they're telling me that they're looking after me.
mhm.
Meanwhile, you know, you've got the world's most successful bureaucrat in Canadian terms, the Brit, who came to Canada to be PM, going off to India and giving the Indians $100 million in
For
scholarship money.
education funds. Yeah.
Yeah, for education funds. Meanwhile, our illustrious Prime Minister of Ontario here takes away what's known as OSAP, which is scholarship money for kids going to school here. Like, and you can't make this up. And then you
No.
wonder why you're looking for alternatives.
Well, I guess that's part of the problem too. Like you said, you were out at an event, and none of the world events were talked about. You know, and
No.
it was yeah, it's sad. You know, I guess maybe uh, like I mentioned, pre-production. It's kind of like an abusive relationship. We just become so inured to um, what's happening to us that it's just another day, and we know nothing is going to change. So
Well,
let's just
we
live.
are things are changing, but they're changing like weird stuff. I have to ask you, Bob, how long will people in your neck of the woods be turned down by the banks for mortgage renewals because the very property their house sits on, there's no clear title because these virtue signaling dips like your premier is happy to go along with these crazy First Nations extortion of taking over essentially entire. I read that the city of Vancouver now is basically I can't even pronounce the tribes that are supposedly now the
Well, this
owners.
is what we call the Musqueam now. What they're how they pronounce it, I don't know, but yeah, and with signing that agreement, the federal government, with the tacit approval of the provincial government, has now upset three or four other people because this particular group was only one of three or four that were claiming that land. So I, I said jokingly, why should I pay my land taxes to the municipal level or to the provincial level, because apparently they don't own it either. And at this particular point, we don't have anybody that really owns it, because it's going to be tied up in courts for who knows how long.
Okay, now here's another question. I'll put you on the spot. All this malarkey and bamboozling policies that are foisted on the people, good people of BC, particularly the Lower Mainland there in Vancouver and Richmond. This is all about making sure that those white colonial people get it in the neck, because this is fairness now. This is retribution. We're balancing the books. There's only one small problem I need to ask here. What do you do with the 50-60% of that population that lives there that happens to be from someplace else? Like Far East, the Orient, or Europe, have no colonial white settler links, period. Okay. They came here in the last 20, 30, 40 years. Yeah. Okay. And they own property, they own businesses, they've invested, they have kids that are born here that are part of the community. They just happen to be Indian, Chinese, Italian, whatever the heck they are. What are they going to do when these folks are told, oh, you are part of those white people who took away our land? How does this work? At what point does the community go, we're done with this?
Well, that's a good question. And the simple answer is I don't know.
I know.
It's also the other part of this is a complex equation, is that we don't know what we're doing on the international scene. How do you expect me to know what we're doing? Yeah, I can tell you, I can step outside my home here and I can say, yeah, it looks the same as it did yesterday, so nothing's really changed. And I guess until that happens, until there's a change, then will anybody do anything? We're also, I think, going back a few years where, and we're still mucking about in the courts of the people that had the audacity to go to Ottawa and blow truck horns and have an emergency act that's been declared at 2 levels of court to be invalid, unconstitutional, and nothing's happened. So I guess other people are sitting back saying, well, why would I take that chance and go and do something when they can take actions against me with impunity? Well, when are we going to let them eat cake? I don't know. When is that moment going to come in Canada?
Usually a counter revolution or a revolution occurs when the majority of the population feels they've been screwed over and it's time they can't take it anymore. And I'm wondering at what point does a placid, dumbed down bunch that we have in this country finally come to the conclusion that, oh, wait a minute, I'm not sure if I want to eat bugs because it's good for me, but because there is no other food. I mean, I'm being sarcastic, obviously, but when does that happen? When does the ordinary schmuck come to the conclusion that we're doing the same thing over and over again, and I'm getting promised all kinds of malarkey, but it's not happening for me. But there's a sort of a feeling of, okay, now like what's different? Like you said, you walk out and it's the same old, but it's not getting better. I mean, there's no inspirational stuff, if you will, coming out of the leadership cadre, and it's divide and conquer at this point, whether it's between genders or between races or between socioeconomic levels or between immigrants and citizens. I mean, this is the game they've been playing now for 10 years. And I'm wondering at what point does this game not work anymore? And at what point does the only thing that this bunch hangs their hat on is, the neighbor to the south being your chief
Antichrist, yeah.
The Antichrist, exactly. Good. I like that. what happens then? I know that if you look at statistics, there's a lot of money leaving the country, going south and going to other places because there's just no. If you are a venture capitalist, you're not going to come to Canada because you're going to give half of it to the government. Okay, so that's not going to happen.
Well, and
Uh,
why put $1 billion into something here when it's going to take 10 years to go through all the red tape and hoops of environmental studies and First Nation studies and any other kind of study they happen to make up? Why would you, as a business person, risk that? You won't. And I, we've got a prime minister who's been around the world. I have no idea how many times now.
he's been to 21 countries since he came on the scene here. I did the stats the other day. This
And
guy's all over the place.
And we've had 21 memorandums of understanding, which is, I mean, I don't think they're enforceable. I don't think that they're bringing any money here. You mentioned one of our broadcasts a month or so ago. When was the last time we saw anybody from the Philippines here to see what they can put investments in?
It's a one-way street. We're going out like paupers with our with the cap in hand, which is not even cap in hand because he's taking other people's money and buying off people who don't need their money. Like, why would you take $100 million to India? Think about this.
Well, that's right. I mean, if you and to put that into India is bigger than China right now,
yes,
population wise. So if, say, for example, we have, well, and what is it, a $19 trillion deficit here in Canada, whatever it happens to be, and India has a $19 trillion deficit. With their population, they could tax every person in that country 10 cents and have that debt paid off.
Yeah.
We would have to be thousands of dollars. I think the Stat Canada said that every Canadian at this moment owes $39,000 is their portion of the debt. And that goes up every second that we talk and breathe.
Yep. Yep. Well, it just boggles the mind that, we have. I always talk about the 40 million because I always say there's not 40 million people in this country. What we have is probably 38 million people, and the rest of them shouldn't be here. But be that as it may, how you've managed over a decade now to dumb them down to the point where they don't grasp any of this stuff. It's been a very effective process.
Well, and you would thinking of that though, the dumbed down. People are very annoyed out here, and I'm assuming probably around your neck of the woods with all this new extortion stuff that's going on. And the first thing that happens when they find out that this guy is a non-citizen, non-permanent resident, illegal, without status, the first thing they do is now claim refugee status. It's showing what a joke our system is. It has been for decades. But maybe people are starting to stand up and go, maybe there is something wrong here. We just don't know what to do about it because we've never been in this position before.
Well, we're living in what I call the stupid bubble, because stuff around us is globally is changing as we speak. There are kinetic actions that are happening, which are you really have to pay attention. But we're blithely going about listening to the goofy stuff coming out of Ottawa that we're going to buy our own stuff, we have our middle power, blah blah blah. The fact is that just last week the Mexicans threw Canada under the bus. As you know, the Shine Bomb said we're not going to go
trilateral. Yeah.
We don't need to deal with Canada. We need to deal with Washington. So Mexico City and Washington basically are going to do their thing bilaterally. By the way, Mexico now has replaced Canada as the #1 trading partner of the U.S. We're now #2 because we've been fooling around for the last 10 years. You have a situation where in our own hemisphere, Venezuela and Cuba are going to likely change drastically over the next year. And what are we doing about it? Well, we have nothing to do about it because we're not even being consulted. Because why would they? Why would? And it's got nothing to do with Trump. It's got to do with an enormous power next to us, both in terms of economy and military. It doesn't need to consult with their little cousin up there in that pink part on the map. Like for what? Okay. When the Japanese were being nice to the PM in Tokyo last week, the ambassador of Japan made it clear that the only reason Toyota and Honda are here doing anything is because 77% of the stuff they make goes to the States. Okay, it's geography and reality. Okay, if the Orange Man decides that I don't want to buy cars made in Canada, they're actually Japanese, you know what they'll do? Do what the Mexicans do. Okay, well, we'll move our plants to, Oklahoma or
Well,
Florida,
Hyundai did that.
wherever.
Hyundai has, I think it's over 1 million square foot factory down in Georgia, just outside of Atlanta. Yeah.
No, I mean,
So
this is the reality that all this malarkey about we're going to buy from ourselves and we're going to prove who we are. Well, you're going to prove nothing. You're going to prove that you don't know what the hell you're talking about because you do not have a government in an entire country that understands what a market-driven capitalist economy is all about. You have to, number one, compete. You don't just talk about it, you actually have to do it. Competition means competition. It doesn't mean that you set up monopolies all over the place and then give them all kinds of money so that they're shielded from competition. So, whether it's your cell phone that you can't provide, or which is entirely monopolistic, or your broadcast media or your press that's entirely monopolistic, or various other things, agricultural, for example, the dairy industry. I mean, it goes on and on and on. We are run in this country by basically corporatists who have in Eastern Canada, and this is where I understand where the West gets PO'd about stuff, because these are oligarchies that run monopolistic corporations that hide behind tariffs, that hide behind supply management policies that everybody knows is complete and utter antithesis to a capitalist, competitive, market-driven economy. But that's what Canadians have been used to now, and the world is changing around us, and they don't understand. Well, we'll just send some money to India. We'll just make some harebrained deal with China. They're laughing their heads off. These silly Canucks are going to come over and sell their souls because you got to keep the corporatists in Eastern Canada, swimming in the money. Because why am I paying $8 for a quart of milk? That's why.
Well, it's a regional thing. Your gas price, you said, was $1.13 a liter.
On First Nations.
Well, besides, we don't have the First Nations places here that can do that because they're kind of governed by the what we used to call the GVRD, the Greater Vancouver Regional District. It's now, I think, called Metro Vancouver, and they're forced, along with every other gas station, to put, I think it's 35 or 40 cents of every liter goes to fund our transportation system.
Wow.
So, that's 40 cents that you don't have to pay. Alberta doesn't have to pay. Prince George in the center of the province doesn't have to pay. It's just a lower mainland tax. I could probably drive to Soyuz and get gas cheaper than I could get it down here.
Well, didn't you tell me in pre-production that one of your friends went down to, I guess, Washington State?
Yeah, saved a bunch of money. 136-liter tank, and do the math here, folks. If it cost me $1.79 per liter, or I can go down to the United States and buy that same product for $1.
From the same refinery, right?
Probably from the same refinery.
Yeah.
for $1.19 converted. I'm sorry, that's 50 cents in my pocket. Now, again, math has never been my strong suit, so 50 cents on 136 liters.
Yeah,
That's a lot of money.
straightforward.
Yeah. And I guess we have to kind of stand up and start thinking that there's something wrong with this. I know there's a big uh, world event going on in the Middle East. I know that 20 to 25% of the world's oil goes through the Strait of Hormuz, but it doesn't quite understand in my small alleged mind of how that could affect the gas overnight here.
That sits in the tank that was delivered 3 weeks ago.
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah.
I know. Well, that it is what it is because the system is so corrupt. I mean, it's back in the 70s, I remember the book about the Seven Sisters, being the oil companies that drove we were going to run out of gas and oil. I remember we all had to line up on odd days to get.
Yeah. Well, we were going to run out of gas by 2000 maybe. Or was that when we were going to be in the ice age? I forget. And the 70s were full of a lot of conspiracy theories.
Well, what you don't hear from our bureaucrat prime minister is that this whole business in Iran and in Venezuela has one common denominator, and that's called the petrodollar. Because without the petrodollar, no one would give a tinker's damn what goes on in Venezuela or Iran. I mean, obviously the terrorist issue is something else, but this is all about oil. This is all about the very thing that our genius leadership in Canada wants to not talk about. We don't have anything to do with fossil fuels. The entire world is flipped on its head right now over fossil fuels. Okay.
And we're the fourth biggest reserves in the world, and we're doing nothing with that.
No,
we could take our national debt, we could almost pay it off if we started selling this stuff.
We send ships from Australia to Halifax.
Yeah.
12,000 miles. LNG. I mean, it's laughable. But we don't want to talk about that. This is how silly this has become, and we're not paying it. We're in this bubble. This Canadian bubble that we live in, which makes, frankly, only sense to the people who are laughing their heads off, counting their money in the various Eastern Canadian cities that produce nothing, just take in lots of money through the various corporate oligarchies and monopolies, and the rest of the folks be damned. And then that's the shame, because this whole business of being a middle power of what? What are you talking about?
Well, we're certainly not the most ignored, and nor are we likely to be. So let's just sit back, and I guess as we're kind of winding down our time here, let's put out a challenge to our Canadian listeners. If there was an election tomorrow, and you believe all the polls that show Mr. Carney heads and shoulders above Mr. Poilievre, ask yourself, is over the last 10 years, has your life gotten better? Because we're doing the same thing over and over and over again, and we're really not getting ahead. Don't listen to polls. Don't listen to news broadcasts.
Don't listen to us.
And try and get back to where we were before as informed voters, where we're listening to both sides of the coin and making our own decisions. And if there is an election in the spring, as there's rumored not to be, let's I will tell you right now that because we are so shallow as voters, we think that because somebody dresses nice and has a $100,000 word salad vocabulary, that they got to be smart. Not that Mr. Polyev is not smart, not that Mr. Carney is not smart.
Oh, no, he's very smart.
They're both
It's all
smart,
right.
but we also have to get to the point where we realize that we're our own worst enemies because we are shallow. We think that the former prime minister had nice hair, so he's got to be a good prime minister material. We've got a guy that was appointed to the Bank of Canada as its chair and appointed to the Bank of England as its chair. It wasn't really a competition. Um, they probably took the people that they thought that they could manipulate the most and made them uh, in charge of policy. And unfortunately, in the case of Mr. Carney, I think that's gone to his head to think that he can run um, the country here like he ran a corporation there. And granted, they both start with a C, but that's about as far as the similarities go.
Must never underestimate the ability of this man to run like a bureaucracy. But a bureaucrat doesn't make policy. A bureaucrat follows policy. Making policy requires a politician. He's not a politician, and he's certainly not a leader with gravitas and the sort of uh, um, uh, je ne sais quoi that makes a leader followed by the people because they're providing inspiration on so many levels.
Well, that's true.
The bureaucrat, cold-hearted bureaucrat, is what this guy is, and he's good at it. There's no question he got hired to be the consultant, if you will, to the banks. He ran. That's what that's a job. If you're if and you're good at it, you're good at it. But that doesn't make you good at other things.
No.
Some of the best leaders of history have had only one thing going for them. They could convince the great unwashed that they had good ideas, and they were followed. Now, sometimes it was not a good idea to follow them, and other times it was. But the vast majority of successful leaders are not bureaucrats. They're not technocrats. They have that thing that makes them attract
Yeah.
folks. That thing that makes an actor compared to other actors really, really good.
Man.
Or
Yeah.
that scientist that is really sharp as opposed to the other. This guy doesn't stand out there. This guy
Well,
is,
I
and
think
he's surrounded by players who are the same tasteless, odorless, kind of crowd that, and obviously he's no friend of this channel, but the point is that, we're treading water as a society here because we're not sure like what happens when you get tired and you sink below the surface.
Well, here's my analogy on that. It goes back to when I used to supervise people, and he would have all these wonderful little standard pat phrases. What was it called? Praising with faint damn or damning with faint praise. We have reached a point here in Canada where, and it might ruffle a few feathers here, but that's the way it is. We are following this particular political party with a current political leader, not so much because he's got the commanding authority like you were talking about with some of the leaders, but we were following him because we really wanted to see where he was going. And coupled with that, there was one, when you mentioned we're in over our heads almost here. There was one line that I think was from the British military, that this man would be out of his depth in a parking lot puddle. Well, we didn't realize that that parking lot puddle now is somewhere like the Marianas Trench. And we're just starting, I would hope that we're just starting to realize here that, we're putting our toes down and we're not finding a bottom here. That maybe this isn't where we should be going. We should be looking for something better. Now, I don't know who that is. I'm not going to say Mr. Polyev is going to do any better. I won't say that Mr. Carney is going to do any better. I don't even know who the NDP person would be because I don't think they've got their leader chosen yet. Mr. Bernier with his Canada People's Party, which sounds very, very dare I say it, very Russian. uh, we bred politicians that are mediocre. Long gone are the days of the Lester Pearsons and the John Diefenbakers.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, even the Chrétiens, for all his faults, I mean, the guy had charisma and so forth. But I think we're victims of our own self-importance as a country. We kind of started to believe our own propaganda about how smart we were or are, how loved we are around the world, how everybody looks up to Canada. Well, that may have been the case.
Well,
a decade or more ago.
I'd agree that people are looking up to us only because they're stroking our feathers, because if we stroke the feathers enough, they're going to give us money.
Yeah, but they're not going to be thankful for it. You think
no,
Senegal cares that these guys sending millions? Or
do you really think India cares whether they're going to get $100 million? No, they don't care.
Of course not. Of course not. This is
because really they don't have to give us anything in return.
No, and the sad part is we become slaves to our own narcissism as a nation as we've got too many questions that we can't answer ourselves. That's the problem here, because if we had some answers to this, like for example, and we'll end on this, if we really had a national focus on what do we want to do building this country. We don't have that anymore. Back in John A. Macdonald's day, the national focus was to build a railway. Okay, so that was the national focus. We don't have that today. Back in the during the war, we had national focus to build up a military that was able to really be more than a middle player during the both wars, even under a foreign flag, because there was no maple leaf flag. We were part of the British Empire, and the decisions were made in London, peripherally made in Ottawa and Washington. But that was the reality. And I think the halcyon days for us really were in the 80s, probably, because after that we're done. And we've forgotten that we live in a world that buffets you around, and you have to have a strong national identity, not one that is serves everybody all the time in any way. You can't do that. That's not how this works. And look at any other civilization, even today, or any other country. You may not like it, but the Chinese know they're Chinese. You may not like it, but the Russians know what they are. You may not like it, but Americans know who they are, even if they are squabbling among themselves. The Japanese know who they are, as a country. We haven't got any of that. And if you don't have that as your foundation as a nation, you're done. You're not here to please all the people all the time. That's not how this works. And we've done that now for over a decade. Okay. I'm sorry. I don't even give the previous administration of this country a lot of kudos, because they tried, but they were pretty milquetoasty about this during the Harper years too. But this is where we are. It's a real estate, and you have a corporate logo, which is very recognizable around the world, called a red and white maple leaf flag. Looks great, but then what? That's not what, you can't just wrap your arms around that and say, that's what makes me Canadian. No. And don't talk to me about the other peripheral nonsense about, well, we're not like anybody else. You're right. We're not. Nobody knows what we are. We're not like anybody else. Because you ask anybody what a Canadian is outside of Canada, never mind inside Canada, they go, I don't know. what is a Canadian? And then various jokes come out. And it's not just our pals to the south. You go anywhere else in the world, and whatever nostalgia they may have about this place is just that, nostalgia. But the reality of today is okay. You're going to send me a check for some crazy program that you want to me to do in Qatar or in I don't know, the Philippines. Okay, fine. I mean, billions have been spent by this government over the last 10 years for what? You think that
Well,
none of those people has come back, oh, well, we want to be just like you. No, they don't.
yeah, well, they would say that if they knew it was going to get them another $100 million or something, but
So until the inspiration comes along and then the perspiration to build the inspiration happens.
yeah. And you're right. And that really to kind of summarize that point is, yeah, maybe we have to be more reliant on ourselves. But in order to do that, we have to realize that we can't spend 10 years to get a project going. We know right now here in BC with the government's plan to move everything electric, with AI, with Bitcoin, with everything else that's going there, we would have to build another, I think somebody said 6 of our Site C dams. Well, our Site C dam, it took over a decade to build. We just, if we want to be noticeable, we can't have that. We can't. I'm not saying go out and destroy the environment and
No.
everything else and don't consult, but we have to get down to a point where this is doable, not some pipe dream.
And we need to be inspired, not having pontifications made towards us as
Yes.
a society. Yes. And don't do it with the approach that special deals for special people, because then you don't have there's no such thing as you're better than the other person, or you're more special than the other person, or you're more virtuous. This is what has wrecked this place as a community, because I want to love my neighbor, but he hates my guts because he thinks that I've got something that he wants, or that I want something that he has. This is what we've been playing for so we sometimes have to be introspective a little bit about our feelings as a community from coast to coast. And I don't know how this is playing out.
Yeah.
Well, I do know how it's not playing out. It's
not playing out, and you're right. We don't have anybody in any current level of government that would make me want to follow them. Nobody in our current political environment has anything that's going to get a national project going. They can talk a lot, but the reality is everybody knows that it's not going to happen. So,
well, look, I'll wrap it up with this. They're giving Mike Myers some special award from the Screen Actors, whatever, in Canada. A guy who's hasn't lived in the country since '88. Okay, who's accomplished what in Canada? Tell me. Okay, he was born here, but so what? All of a sudden he's now some kind of has-been hero. I don't. That's
well,
that's the nostalgia I'm talking about.
He's one of many.
Yeah, this is the point, and I think we have to get over ourselves, and if we don't, we better start thinking about alternatives seriously before someone else thinks of them and foists it upon us. And I can say we are not living in this world in isolation. Here we are in the Western Hemisphere, parked next door to a behemoth, and we better figure out how to
like it or lump it. Yeah.
Well, I think there's opportunities, but they're quickly
evaporating.
Exactly. All right. Well, listen.
So anyway, like us
over here,
other side,
over there.
other side.
It's over.
Like
Yeah,
us-
it's over here. It's
like
over
us-
there. Over there. Over there. Yeah, like this is it. Yes.
Yeah, man, you know, we certainly, in spite of, you know, whether you like us or whether you don't, you know, we would still drink the coffee that you buy us.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we may have been a day late and $1 short, but I think we made up for it.
Well, I hope so. And I think, I think that's the thrust of this whole series over the last couple of weeks is Canada, you better wake up. Because you're gonna head into a nightmare if you don't.
That's right.
Yeah. Anyway,
Okay. Have a good weekend.
and you too.
I'll see you next week, or maybe earlier
Depends.
as the world turns.
Yes, and that's not the soap opera.
No, it isn't. All right, Bob. Take care.
Just a